everybody, this is the third and final video to help you for your exam on Monday, paper 2 on macroeconomics. So remember that this paper covers the theory from themes 2 and 4, and there is already a video covering the theory from theme 2, and there are 2 videos covering the theory for theme 4 which go before this. This is the third and final one on theme 4. So this is the format for your exam on Monday. And to continue with the topics, the final ones for theme 4. Public expenditure. So this can fall into different categories for the government. So public expenditure is spending by government. It can be capital expenditure. This is spending on infrastructure, for example, roads, schools, hospitals. This is investing in capital for the long term. Current expenditure is day-to-day spending, for example, on wages of people employed by the government, so nurses and teachers, for example. Transfer payments are payments by the government to people which they receive nothing in return for. So, for example, paying unemployment benefits. This is a transfer payment. There are reasons over time that in countries they may have changes in what they're spending government money on and how much money is being spent by governments. This could be determined by the level of economic growth within a country, because as a country grows, it's likely that tax revenues will increase and the government will have more money to spend. Additionally, political changes can impact how much is spent by governments, because some political parties will want to be spending more, for instance, on a welfare state and helping people who are unemployed or unwell, whereas in other political systems it will be more free market and there'll be less spending by government. There is an impact on these different categories from the government spending money. If they spend on infrastructure, then this can improve productivity in the economy. For instance, if they spend on education, health, roads, and electricity system structures, for example, these will improve productivity, and this will increase the economy's productive potential, initially giving potential economic growth, and then likely giving real economic growth in the longer term. Also, people living within the economy will be impacted by government spending. It may be from the government spending on the welfare state or benefits or health or education for people in the country. And this, if you're receiving benefits, for example, you will receive an income. So this would improve your living standard. But additionally, if there's government spending which increases the economy's productive potential in the long term, then this will potentially lead to real economic growth, and this will increase the amount of jobs available, increase incomes, and improve people's living standards through economic growth. If the government spend money, this can lead to the problem of crowding out. Crowding out is where the government spend money, and this pushes out spending by the private sector on investment. This is because if the government spends money, the theory is that there's less money available to be spent by others. Therefore, it increases the price of money available in the market. So for private firms, this will increase the price of borrowing, and therefore they'll be less likely to invest, and investment will fall. The level of taxation, where taxes are set, will impact in the long run how much public expenditure there is, in all likelihood. This is because generally, if a country collects in more tax revenue, there will be more government spending. If the government decide to spend money on welfare and unemployment benefits and child benefit, for example, they can increase the equality within an economy because they are giving to people who would otherwise have less. Taxation in an economy comes in different forms. So these are the different ways that the government can collect in tax revenue. They can put direct taxes on two things. A direct tax is paid on income or profit. So income tax and corporation tax are direct taxes. Indirect taxes are paid on goods and services. In the UK, this is paid via VAT, value added tax. And then taxes can be progressive, proportional, or regressive. Progressive means as your income increases, you pay a higher proportion of your income in tax. Proportional means as your income increases, you pay the same proportion in tax. Regressive means as your income increases, you pay a smaller percentage of your income in tax. The UK income tax system is progressive. UK VAT is a proportional tax. And if you have a tax where as your income increases, you pay less in tax, that would be regressive. If there are changes in taxes within an economy, the tax is being set by the government, this can change these factors. So incentive to work, if income tax goes up, some people may think that as they can now keep less of their income, there's less incentive to work. So they may become economically inactive and move out of the workforce. On the other hand, some people will see when income tax goes up, they will decide that they're going to work more hours so that they can actually end up taking home the same amount of pay despite the increase in income tax rates. If VAT, for instance, value-added tax on indirect tax, if that increases, some people may have more of an incentive to join the workforce and to work more because products are more expensive in the shops. The amount of tax revenue that is collected in will be determined very much by not only the tax rate, but on how firms and people behave. The Laffer curve says that if tax rates increase at a certain point, it's possible that actually tax revenue will start to decrease. And the axes on the Laffer curve diagram are tax rate on one side and tax revenue on the other. The argument here is that if taxes are too high, people will start to evade tax. That's illegal. That's not declaring tax or not paying it where you should. Also, they'll start to avoid tax. That's A-OK. You're allowed to do that. But that means that, again, people are paying less tax. They're finding legal ways to pay less tax. People might leave the country. Businesses might leave the country. So this theory would say that a government needs to set taxes at the right place so that they get the most tax revenue, not too high and not too low. Taxation can impact income distribution because income tax takes income away from people, and then that money can be redistributed via benefits. Additionally, if wealth is taxed, then people hold less wealth and therefore they can earn less income from that wealth. So that could also help with a more equal income distribution. If taxes are put in place, if taxes are higher, that would be contractionary fiscal policy. That will decrease consumption and investment, which will decrease real output, ceteris paribus, and unemployment would increase. So taxation going up or going down, the tax rates will affect real output and employment, depending on which direction the tax rates are changed. Equally, on an AD-AS diagram, if taxes go up and AD goes down, it's possible that the price level will fall unless the economy has a lot of spare capacity and is already on the perfectly elastic part of the LRAS curve. Likewise, if taxes go down, expansionary fiscal policy, this may lead to an increase in the price level. Contractionary, it may lead to a fall in the price level. The trade balance can be affected in a country if taxes are higher for businesses, for example. That will mean their products are probably more expensive. They will become less internationally competitive. Exports will probably decrease. If taxes are high, for example, for businesses within an economy, firms may be less incentivized to set up in that economy, and it might reduce the amount of FDI that comes in. Public sector finances can change in these other ways, and the other factors to know about them. Automatic stabilizers are things that happen automatically. The government aren't deciding to do this. The main one here is about unemployment benefits. If the economy enters a recession, unemployment will go up. More people will receive unemployment benefits in economies where those are paid. And that will actually increase government spending, which would actually increase AD. So it's likely AD will increase a small amount because of the automatic stabilizer. It's called a stabilizer because, like stabilizers on a bike, when you're learning to ride a bike, the AD would have been falling during a recession, but the automatic stabilizer pulls it back a tiny bit in the opposite direction. Likewise, in a boom, when AD is increasing, more people will have jobs, less unemployment benefit will be paid, and actually that will cause government spending to decrease, again pulling AD back a little bit. Discretionary fiscal policy is where the government are exercising their discretion to choose. They are choosing to spend more or spend less, choosing to put taxes up or down. This is a decision on their part. It's not automatic. In any year, you can calculate whether there is a fiscal deficit or a fiscal surplus. That's the same thing as a budget deficit or a budget surplus. That's just calculated annually. A fiscal deficit means that government spending is greater than tax revenue. A fiscal surplus means that government spending is less than tax revenue. National debt is cumulative, it's calculated over time. Each year you add on whether you have a fiscal deficit or a fiscal surplus. If you keep having more fiscal deficits, the national debt will get bigger and bigger. The national debt is the total amount of money owed by an economy to other countries. A structural deficit is where the government is in deficit as a result of there being a decrease in aggregate demand in the economy, where this is over time. Over time, the economy is collecting in less tax revenue and perhaps paying out more in government spending. A cyclical deficit is where the government has a deficit because of the economic cycle. So, for example, during a recession, they may be collecting in less tax revenue and they'll be spending more to try and support the economy and perhaps use expansionary fiscal policy by increasing government spending. The size of a fiscal deficit will depend in part on the politics of the government in place and also on how the economy is doing. If an economy has a lot of economic growth, there will be more tax revenue spent, and therefore they are less likely to have a fiscal deficit because they'll be collecting in more tax revenue. If an economy has a lot of corruption, this can be a problem. There's more likely to be a fiscal deficit. Less money will be collected in. Methods for collecting tax may be questionable and not enough is collected in, and the government may be overspending. National debt, this will be determined by how much money a country has borrowed. And if an economy keeps having fiscal deficits, they will be borrowing more and more. If a country can't service its national debt regularly, it can't pay back the money, the national debt will be growing because they will have to start paying interest on interest which hasn't been repaid. So the national debt will get bigger and bigger. The size of a fiscal deficit will impact how much government may spend in the future, because they may think that they need to try and get spending under control and not have another fiscal deficit. Also, if there is a significant national debt, the government may be trying to reduce this. Reducing fiscal deficits, reducing national debts, these will likely result in austerity, which is where the government spends less and increases taxes. These are likely to decrease aggregate demand and could trigger a recession. Macroeconomic policies in a global context. This is an overview of all different macroeconomic policies that can be used in different countries. So countries can be using any of fiscal, monetary, supply side policies and exchange rate policies, and also direct controls. This is where they are controlling their currency or making other decisions to control what's happening in their economy. You may well in the exam have to look at these different policies being used and weigh up which is the most effective, why is that, which one would you recommend being used, what consequences might there be for the short term and the long term, who are their trading partners, for example, what's their prospect for the future. What are they hoping to do with the country's economy? If an economy is trying to reduce a fiscal deficit or national debt, as I just said before, this will likely impact the economy now, but potentially beneficially in the future. If an economy is trying to reduce poverty and inequality, how are they doing that? Are they doing it through export-led growth? Are they receiving aid? Are they receiving help from NGOs? How are they achieving this? Are they achieving it on their own? And are these changes that they're undertaking sustainable? Also, are they sustainable for the environment? There may be changes by the central bank of the rate of interest and the supply of money, quantitative easing. What will be the impact of these in the long term and the short term? How can an economy increase their international competitiveness? You can see from this so far, these are things that are already covered in theme 4. So this is just a case of applying your theory to different situations. Remember, in the exam, they may say to you, with reference to a developed economy of your choice, or with reference to a developing economy of your choice. So it's a good idea before the exam to have some ideas about the country that you might use as your example. Governments might also use macroeconomic policy to respond to external shocks. So right now, how are countries responding to the increase in oil prices and wheat prices? How did economies in the world respond to COVID? How did the UK respond to Brexit? These are all external shocks, and different economies respond differently with different results. Finally, governments might be trying to put in place policy to control global companies. This is extremely difficult because there is no consensus between all countries in the world. Different economies are operating differently. Transfer pricing can occur where multinational companies are moving their profits to a country which has low tax rates. This is difficult to stop. It's allowed, so it's only tax avoidance. It's A-OK. They're allowed to do it, even if you think that it's immoral. And some economies are actually doing things with taxes to try and attract multinationals, which can go against what other countries think should be done regarding taxing and controlling global companies. For example, in Ireland, in an area in Dublin, the capital, they have very low corporation tax rates, and these were set up in order to attract foreign direct investment and create jobs. Some people, though, think it's unfair for companies to set up their European headquarters in Dublin and pay lower corporation tax. There are these definite limits on the government ability to control global companies, and there's an argument to be had here of whether the benefits of having the operation of these global companies on balance actually improves consumers' lives, even if the companies aren't paying significant tax. When governments are trying to put in place policy, they're always going to face problems in any country with not having enough information. They may have inaccurate information or information missing. There are always what can be called black swans, which are events that nobody expected to happen. For instance, COVID. They're things that no one thinks are round the corner, and governments have to respond to these quickly. They can make mistakes, and they have to try and use the evidence that they have in their hands at the time. And you can think about the impact of these responses on different groups. Are some people more positively impacted than others? The final one, again, about these external shocks. Governments can't control for these. And generally, the nature of a black swan is that it's completely unexpected. Nobody thought it was going to happen, so nobody has planned for it. So that's paper 2, all of the theory from theme 2 and theme 4 covered. Just some final things for you to think about when you're answering questions in the exam. Remember that this paper, the questions will be about specific countries. Try and apply to those. Think about these extra points. And finally, don't forget to take your cup of tea into the exam with you. Remember, it's a mark a minute, so your timing is very important. Force yourself to stop after those minutes. Explain your points so that you have detail and chains of reasoning. And finally, you need to apply. You need to use the data where appropriate or your own examples. And remember, what's the question word? Does it require evaluation or not? Really good luck in your paper 2. I hope it goes really well, and I hope you get the grade that you are hoping for. Good luck.